The scent of freshly baked bread stopped Dalton Lawson dead in his tracks as he rode toward his ranch house in the fading light of an August evening in 1882. The Montana Territory stretching wild and endless around his property, just outside the small town of Redding. He had been gone for 3 days, driving cattle to the northern pasture with his hired hands, and the house should have been empty, locked tight as he had left it. Yet smoke curled from the chimney, and that aroma, that impossibly familiar scent of baking bread, drifted across the dusty yard and wrapped around something deep in his memory, something he had buried years ago beneath hard work and isolation. Dalton dismounted slowly, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. At 28 years old, he had learned to be cautious. This land was still rough, still untamed, and strangers in your home usually meant trouble. But something about that smell kept his hand from drawing the weapon. Instead, he tied his horse to the post and walked quietly toward the front door, which he found unlocked. The inside of his home glowed with warm lamplight, and the kitchen, which occupied the back half of the main room, bustled with activity. A woman stood at his cast iron stove, her back to him, dark hair pinned up in a simple bun with loose strands escaping around her neck. She wore a faded blue dress, dusty from travel, and she hummed softly as she worked, checking the bread in the oven with the practiced ease of someone who had baked 1,000 loaves. Dalton stood frozen in his own doorway, watching her. She reached for a cloth to protect her hands, pulled the bread from the oven, and set it on the wooden counter to cool. The smell intensified, and suddenly Dalton was 8 years old again, standing in his mother's kitchen in Tennessee, watching her do this exact same thing. His mother had died of fever when he was 10, and he had not smelled bread quite like this since. The memory hit him like a physical blow. The woman must have sensed his presence because she turned suddenly, her eyes going wide with surprise. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 24 or 25, with striking features and eyes the color of amber that caught the lamplight. Despite her obvious exhaustion and the dust on her clothes, she held herself with dignity. "I am so sorry," she said immediately, her voice soft but clear. "I know this looks terrible, me being in your home without permission. My name is Zara Kendall, and I have been traveling for weeks. I ran out of food 2 days ago, and when I came upon your ranch, I saw it was empty. The door was locked, but I managed to get in through a back window. I was so hungry, and I found flour and yeast in your pantry, so I made bread. I know it was wrong, but I planned to leave payment and a note explaining everything." Dalton finally found his voice. "You broke into my house to bake bread." She flinched at his tone but did not look away. "Yes, I am truly sorry. I can leave right now if you want. I have a little money. I can pay you for what I used." She reached into a small pouch at her waist and pulled out a few coins, holding them out with a trembling hand. He noticed then how thin she was, how her dress hung loose on her frame, and how her face had the hollowed look of someone who had not eaten well in far too long. She was clearly not a thief or a troublemaker. She was desperate. "Put your money away," he said, his voice softer now. "When did you last eat a real meal?" Zara hesitated, then admitted, 4 days ago. I had some dried meat, but it ran out." Dalton moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "Then sit down. You made the bread, so we might as well eat it. I have butter and some preserves. We can make a proper meal of it." "You are not angry?" she asked, clearly surprised. "Oh, I am not thrilled someone broke into my house," he said, moving to the sink to wash his hands. "But you did not steal anything, and you were planning to pay for what you used. That counts for something. Besides, that bread smells better than anything I have eaten in months." Relief washed over her face, and she sank into one of the wooden chairs at his small dining table. Dalton cut thick slices of the still warm bread, brought out butter from his cold cellar, and found a jar of blackberry preserves his neighbor had given him last month. He also brought out some dried beef and cheese, laying it all on the table. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Dalton watched as Zara tried to eat slowly, with manners, but her hunger kept overcoming her intentions. She devoured 2 slices of bread with butter before even touching anything else. "Where are you traveling to?" Dalton asked finally. Zara swallowed her bite and took a sip of the water he had poured for her. "I was going to Billings. I heard there might be work there in one of the hotels or restaurants. I can cook and clean, and I was hoping to find a position." "You traveled from where?" "Kansas. I left 3 months ago." Her voice grew quieter. "My father died last winter. He was a farmer, but we lost the farm to the bank. I had no other family, so I decided to head west. I heard there were more opportunities for women willing to work hard." Dalton nodded slowly. He knew that story all too well. The frontier was full of people running from loss, seeking new starts. 3 months is a long time to be on the road alone. That is dangerous for anyone, but especially for a woman. "I know," she said simply. "But what choice did I have? I could not stay in Kansas with nothing and no one." He studied her across the table. Despite her situation, she met his eyes directly, without shame or guile. There was a strength in her that reminded him of his mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion keeping their small farm going after his father died. "This bread," he said slowly, "it tastes exactly like my mother's used to taste. She died 18 years ago, and I have not had bread like this since." "How did you make it?" Zara looked surprised. "I used a starter that belonged to my grandmother. She passed it down to my mother, who gave it to me. It is probably 40 years old now, maybe older. The recipe came from her mother, who learned it in Germany before coming to America." "Is that why you are being kind to me? Because it reminds you of your mother?" Dalton considered the question. "Maybe partly, but also because you are clearly not a criminal. You are just someone who fell on hard times and did what you had to do to survive. I can respect that." "Thank you," she said softly. "You have no idea what your kindness means to me." They finished eating, and Dalton made coffee while Zara cleaned up the kitchen, insisting on washing the dishes despite his protests. As they worked in the comfortable quiet, Dalton found himself thinking. His ranch was successful enough. He had 200 head of cattle, good grazing land, and a small but steady income. He managed most of the work himself with the help of 2 hired hands who came during the busiest seasons. But the house was always empty, always cold despite the fires he lit. He had lived alone for 5 years now, ever since he had scraped together enough money to buy this land and build this house. "Miss Kendall," he said as she dried the last dish, "I have a proposition for you." She turned to him, wariness creeping into her expression. "What kind of proposition?" "Nothing improper," he said quickly, seeing her concern. "I need help around here. The house is a mess. I can barely cook anything beyond beans and bacon, and I have been meaning to plant a garden but never have the time. If you are looking for work, I could hire you. Room and board plus $30 a month. You would have your own room, and I would expect you to be treated with respect. No one would bother you here." Zara stared at him. "You want to hire me, just like that? You do not even know me. I know you are a hard worker. I know you are honest enough to want to pay for the flour you used. I know you can bake bread that tastes like heaven. That is more than enough for me." She was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking it through. "Can I ask you something first?" "Go ahead. Why are you alone out here? A man with a successful ranch, a good house, you seem decent enough. Why is there no wife, no family?" Dalton leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. I was engaged once back in Wyoming. Her name was Sarah. We were planning to marry, but she decided she wanted a man with more money, more prospects. She married a banker instead. That was 6 years ago. I decided I was better off alone, focused on building something that was mine. I moved here, bought this land, and have been working it ever since. I do not have time for courting or socializing much. Zara nodded slowly. And you would not expect anything from me beyond the work, just the work, he confirmed. You would be an employee, nothing more. I am not looking for anything else. Then I accept, she said, but I want to be clear. I will work hard for you. I will earn my keep. I do not want charity. Fair enough, Dalton said, extending his hand. She took it and they shook on the agreement. Her hand was small in his, but work roughened and strong. That night, Dalton gave Zara the smaller bedroom that he had been using for storage. He spent an hour clearing it out, bringing in a proper bed frame from the barn and making it up with clean sheets. Zara protested that it was too much trouble, but he insisted. By the time he finished, it was past midnight and they were both exhausted. As Dalton lay in his own bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he wondered if he had made a mistake. Hiring a strange woman on impulse was not like him. He was usually cautious, measured, always thinking things through. But something about Zara Kendall made him want to take the chance. Maybe it was the bread reminding him of his mother. Maybe it was the way she held herself with dignity despite having nothing. Or maybe it was something else, something he was not ready to name yet. The next morning, Dalton woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. He dressed quickly and emerged from his room to find Zara already up, dressed in the same blue dress but with an apron tied over it, cooking breakfast on the stove. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, which he noticed she had already cleaned, and the whole house felt different, warmer somehow. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I hope you do not mind that I started breakfast. I found eggs in the coop and bacon in the cold cellar." "I do not mind at all," Dalton said, taking a seat at the table. "This is exactly what I hired you for." She brought him a plate piled with bacon, fried eggs, and thick slices of the bread from last night, toasted and buttered. It was the best breakfast he had eaten in years. As they ate, they discussed the work that needed doing. Zara wanted to clean the entire house thoroughly, do all the laundry that had piled up, and start planning a late-season garden. Dalton had ranch work to attend to but promised to bring her into town in a few days so she could buy fabric for new dresses and anything else she might need. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zara threw herself into her work with an energy that amazed Dalton. Within a week, the house was spotless. Curtains that had been dingy with dust were washed and bright, and the smell of cooking filled the air at every meal. She planted a garden with the last of the growing season ahead, putting in quick-growing vegetables like lettuce and radishes, and started planning for the next year. Dalton found himself looking forward to coming back to the house each evening. It was not just the hot meals or the clean clothes. It was the company. Zara was easy to talk to, intelligent and curious about the ranch and the territory. In the evenings after dinner, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, about 3 weeks after Zara arrived, they were sitting outside when she asked, "Do you ever regret leaving Wyoming, starting over here?" Dalton considered the question. "No, I do not think so. Wyoming was where I lost everything that mattered to me. First my parents, then Sarah. This place gave me a chance to build something new, something that is entirely mine. What about you? Do you regret leaving Kansas?" "No," she said firmly. "There was nothing left for me there but memories of my father dying and losing everything we worked for. I miss him terribly, but staying would not have brought him back. At least here I have a chance to make something of myself." "You already are making something of yourself," Dalton said. "You have done more with this place in 3 weeks than I managed in months." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes and made them sparkle in the fading light. "Thank you for saying that. You have no idea how much I needed this chance." As September turned the grass golden and brought cooler nights, Dalton began to notice things about Zara that he had not let himself see before. The way she hummed while she worked, always the same tune, something she said her mother used to sing. The way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on a recipe. The way her whole face lit up when she laughed at something he said. He found himself wanting to make her laugh more often, just to see that transformation. He also noticed how she had filled out in the weeks of regular meals, her face no longer gaunt, her movements more energetic. She was beautiful, he realized with a start one morning as he watched her hanging laundry on the line, her face turned up to the sun. Not beautiful in the delicate, fragile way Sarah had been, but in a strong, vibrant way that matched this hard land. The realization troubled him. He had not hired her for that. He had promised her nothing but honest work and respect. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable or to ruin the easy companionship they had built. So he kept his feelings to himself and tried to focus on the work. But Zara was not oblivious. She had noticed changes in Dalton too. The way he lingered over breakfast instead of rushing out to work. The way he found excuses to come back to the house during the day, asking if she needed anything from the barn or if she wanted him to move something heavy. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, his dark eyes soft with something she was afraid to name. She had not meant to develop feelings for him. When she accepted his job offer, she had been grateful for the chance to work and to have safety and security. But as the weeks passed, she found herself drawn to him in ways that went beyond gratitude. He was kind but not soft, strong but not brutal, intelligent and thoughtful. He treated her like an equal, asking her opinions on ranch matters and listening when she spoke. After a lifetime of being dismissed or overlooked, his respect meant everything to her. One afternoon in late September, Dalton came back to the house earlier than usual. He found Zara in the kitchen, covered in flour, looking frustrated. "What is wrong?" he asked. "I am trying to make pie crust, but it keeps falling apart. I am following my mother's recipe exactly, but something is not working." She gestured helplessly at the counter, which was indeed covered in flour and bits of crumbly dough. Dalton washed his hands and came to stand beside her. "Show me what you are doing." She walked him through the process and he watched carefully. "I think your problem is you are working the dough too much. The heat from your hands is melting the butter. Here, let me show you something my mother taught me." He reached around her, his arms bracketing her as he demonstrated the technique, working the dough quickly and gently. Zara was acutely aware of his closeness, the warmth of his body behind her, the scent of leather and horses and the outdoors that always clung to him. Her heart hammered in her chest. "See," he said softly, his breath stirring the loose hairs at her temple. "Just a few quick motions and then you let it rest." "I see," she managed to say, though her voice came out shakier than she intended. Dalton stepped back and she immediately missed his warmth. He cleared his throat. "I will let you finish. I need to check on the horses." He left quickly, and Zara stood at the counter, her hands still in the flour, her mind spinning. That moment had felt like more than just cooking instruction. The air between them had been charged with something electric, something dangerous and thrilling. That night at dinner, they were both quieter than usual. The easy conversation they normally shared felt stilted, and the silence stretched between them awkwardly. Finally, Dalton set down his fork and looked at her directly. Zara, I need to say something, and I need you to be honest with me. Her heart jumped into her throat. All right. I hired you to work here, and I promised you that our relationship would be professional, that you would be safe and respected. I meant that promise, and I still mean it. But I have to be honest with you about something. I have developed feelings for you. Feelings that go beyond employer and employee. Zara stared at him, unable to speak. He continued, his words coming faster now. I do not want to make you uncomfortable. If you want me to keep this strictly professional, I will. I will never mention this again, and nothing will change. But if there is any chance that you might feel the same way, I needed you to know. You deserve to know. She found her voice at last. When did you realize that you had feelings for me? I am not sure exactly. It built gradually. But I think the moment I really knew was when I was watching you hang laundry a few weeks ago. The sun was shining on your face, and you looked so at peace, so at home here. And I realized I wanted you to always be here, not just as my employee, but as my partner. As someone I could build a life with. Zara felt tears prick at her eyes. I was so afraid you would say something like this. His face fell. I am sorry, I should not have said anything. No, wait, she said quickly, reaching across the table to grab his hand. I was afraid because I feel the same way, and I did not want to ruin what we have here. I did not want to seem ungrateful or presumptuous. You gave me a job when I was desperate, and I did not want you to think I was taking advantage of your kindness. Dalton's expression transformed, hope lighting his features. You feel the same way? Yes, she said, squeezing his hand. I think I started falling for you that first night when you were kind to me, when you had every right to throw me out or worse. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. But it is more than gratitude. You make me feel valued, respected, seen. I have not felt that way since my father died. Dalton stood and came around the table, pulling her gently to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. I do value you. I see you. You are the strongest, most capable woman I have ever met, and you make this house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. So what do we do now? She whispered. I think we court properly, he said. I think we take our time and do this right. I want to marry you someday, Zara Kendall, but I want you to be sure. I want you to know that you are choosing this because you want to, not because you feel obligated or because you have nowhere else to go. I already know I want this, she said, but I appreciate that you want to do it right. So yes, let us court properly. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and kissed her softly. It was gentle and sweet, a promise more than a demand, and Zara felt warmth spread through her entire body. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. The next few months were the happiest of Zara's life. She and Dalton courted like young people in a small town, with all the proper steps and traditions. He took her into Reading and introduced her to everyone, making it clear she was his intended. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers from the pasture, a new hair comb from the general store, a book of poetry he thought she might like. They went on picnics when the weather allowed, riding out to beautiful spots on his land where they could watch the wildlife and talk for hours. Dalton was amazed at how natural it felt to be with Zara. Unlike with Sarah, he never felt like he had to pretend to be someone he was not. Zara appreciated him for exactly who he was, a hard-working rancher who loved this land and wanted to build something lasting. She shared his values and his vision for the future. They talked about expanding the ranch, adding chickens and maybe some pigs, planting a larger garden and selling the surplus in town. They talked about children someday, about building a life together that was rooted in this place they both had come to love. In November, Dalton took Zara back to Reading to meet with the minister of the small church. He wanted to propose properly, with a ring and a plan. The minister, An elderly man named Reverend Thomas was delighted to meet Zara and agreed to marry them whenever they decided. On a cold December evening, with the first snow of the season falling softly outside, Dalton got down on one knee in front of the fireplace. Zara was knitting, a skill she had been teaching herself from a book, and she looked up in surprise when he moved from his chair. "Zara Kendall," he said, pulling out a simple gold band he had bought from the jeweler in town. "I know we have not known each other long by some standards, but I feel like I have known you forever. You walked into my life on a summer evening and you brought light and warmth with you. You made my house a home. You made me remember what it feels like to want more than just work and survival. Will you marry me? Will you build this life with me as my wife and my partner?" Tears streamed down Zara's face as she set down her knitting and dropped to her knees in front of him. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. There is nothing I want more." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed as the fire crackled beside them, and the snow fell outside, the rest of the world far away. They were married 2 weeks later, just before Christmas, in the small church in Reading. It was a simple ceremony with only a handful of people in attendance, mostly Dalton's neighbors and a few townspeople who had become friendly with Zara during her trips to town. Zara wore a new dress she had sewn herself from fabric Dalton had bought her, a beautiful deep green that brought out the amber in her eyes. Dalton wore his best suit, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed her with a joy that made everyone in the church smile. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, and Zara had spent days preparing food. The table groaned under the weight of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, 3 different kinds of pie, and a beautiful cake that Zara had managed to make despite her nervousness. Their guests ate and drank and toasted the happy couple, and as the evening wore on and people began to head home, Dalton and Zara stood at the door thanking everyone for coming. Finally, they were alone. The house was a mess from the party, but neither of them cared. Dalton took Zara's hand and led her to the bedroom they would now share. He had spent the previous day moving his things into the larger room and making it ready for both of them. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly as they stood beside the bed. "A little," she admitted, "but more excited than nervous. I have been waiting for this." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and they came together with a passion that had been building for months. Dalton was gentle with her, patient and attentive, and Zara gave herself to him completely, trusting him with her body and her heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the warm bed, talking quietly and laughing, both of them feeling complete in a way neither had expected to feel again. The winter passed in a blur of contentment. Dalton and Zara settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They worked side by side during the day, Zara managing the house and Dalton the ranch, but always finding time to be together. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. On Sundays, they would dress up and go to church in town, sitting together in the pew and singing hymns, their voices blending. In February, Zara realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses and had been feeling queasy in the mornings. She was almost certain before she even said anything to Dalton, but she wanted to wait to be sure. Finally, one evening at dinner, she reached across the table and took his hand. "Dalton, I have something to tell you." He looked up from his meal, immediately attentive. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, something is very right. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The look on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. Pure joy, followed by wonder, followed by a fierce protectiveness that made her heart swell. "A baby," he repeated, as if testing the words. "We are going to be parents." "Yes," she said, laughing at his expression. probably sometime in late September or early October. He came around the table and pulled her to her feet, kissing her and then dropping to his knees to kiss her still flat stomach. "I cannot believe it. I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said, running her fingers through his hair. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Zara felt well, aside from the morning sickness that lasted into her 4th month. As her belly grew, Dalton became increasingly protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy and constantly checking on her throughout the day. She found it endearing, even when it became a bit excessive. In town, the women of Reading welcomed Zara fully into their community once her pregnancy became obvious. They threw her a small party in June, giving her hand-sewn baby clothes and blankets, offering advice and support. Zara had not had close female friends since leaving Kansas, and she found herself forming bonds with these women, particularly with Sarah Morgan, the wife of the town doctor, and Elizabeth Hart, who ran the general store with her husband. The summer was hot and long, and Zara spent much of it trying to stay cool and prepare for the baby. She sewed tiny gowns and blankets, washed and folded everything a dozen times, and made sure the small cradle Dalton had built was perfectly positioned next to their bed. As September approached, she grew more anxious and excited in equal measure. On a cool evening in early October, as the leaves were turning gold and red on the few trees that surrounded the ranch, Zara's labor began. Dalton rode into town to fetch Dr. Morgan, and by the time they returned, Zara's contractions were coming close together. Sarah Morgan had come with her husband, and she took charge immediately, sending Dalton out of the room despite his protests. "You will just be in the way," Sarah said firmly. "Go wait in the kitchen. We will call you when the baby arrives." The labor was long and difficult. Zara had expected pain, but the reality was worse than anything she had imagined. But Sarah was a constant presence, encouraging her, helping her through each contraction, and Dr. Morgan was skilled and experienced. Finally, after nearly 12 hours, a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Dr. Morgan announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." They cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Zara's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Go get your husband," Sarah told one of the neighbor women who had come to help, and moments later, Dalton burst into the room. He stopped dead at the sight of Zara holding their son, his eyes filling with tears. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "It is a boy," Zara said softly. "We have a son." "He is perfect," Dalton whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The baby's hand closed around his finger instinctively, and Dalton let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Zara asked. They had discussed names for months but had not made a final decision. Now, looking at their son, Dalton said, "What about James, after your father?" Zara's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You would name him after my father, of course. Your father helped make you who you are, and I am grateful to him for that. James Lawson. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," she said, kissing the baby's forehead. "James Dalton Lawson." Dr. Morgan and Sarah left after making sure both Zara and the baby were healthy and stable. The neighbor women cleaned up and then also departed, leaving the new little family alone. Dalton lay on the bed next to Zara, and they both watched James sleep, marveling at every tiny movement and sound. "I cannot believe he is ours," Dalton said softly. "I cannot believe we made him." "I know," Zara agreed. "It feels like a miracle." "You are amazing," Dalton said, turning to look at his wife. "You are the strongest person I know, Watching you bring our son into the world, I have never loved you more. I love you too, she said. Thank you for giving me this life, this family. A year ago, I was alone and desperate with no hope for the future. Now I have everything I ever wanted. The first few months with James were exhausting but wonderful. He was a good baby, generally happy and healthy, though he kept them up many nights with crying. Zara and Dalton took turns walking him, rocking him, soothing him. They were both bleary-eyed and tired, but neither would have traded it for anything. As winter settled in again, they hunkered down as a family, keeping the house warm and cozy. Dalton did the necessary ranch work, but spent as much time as possible inside with Zara and James. He was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his off-key voice, and spending hours just watching the baby sleep. By the time spring arrived and James was 6 months old, the little family had found their rhythm. Zara had recovered her strength and energy, and James was growing rapidly, his personality starting to emerge. He was a happy, curious baby, always reaching for things and babbling in his own language. One warm evening in May, they were sitting on the porch as they had so many times before, James asleep in his cradle beside them. Dalton reached over and took Zara's hand. "You remember the first time we sat out here like this?" he asked. "Back when you had just started working for me, and we were still figuring each other out." "I remember," Zara said. "I was so nervous, so worried about making a mistake or doing something that would make you regret hiring me." "I was falling for you even then," Dalton admitted. "I just did not want to admit it to myself." "I was falling for you too," Zara said. "You saved me, you know, not just by giving me a job and a place to stay, but by treating me like I mattered, like I had value beyond just what I could do for you." "You did save me too," Dalton said. "I did not even realize how lonely I was until you showed up. This house was just a building before you arrived. You made it a home. You gave me a reason to want more than just work and survival. You gave me a family." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains, the land stretching wild and beautiful around them. James stirred in his cradle, making small, happy sounds, and Zara reached down to rock him gently. "I want more of this," Dalton said suddenly. "More children, I mean. Not right away, but someday. I want this house to be full of life and noise and love." "I want that too," Zara agreed. "Maybe 2 more, or 3. A big family so the children always have each other." 3 more sounds perfect," Dalton said, grinning. "Though let us give you some time to recover first." Time passed in the way it does for happy people, quickly and slowly at the same time. Each day was full of small moments that were precious, and yet before they knew it, months and years had passed. James learned to walk and talk, becoming a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Zara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lucy. 2 years after that, another daughter, Anna, was born. And when James was 7 and the girls were 4 and 2, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This 4th pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. Zara was older now, 33, and she felt every day of it. She was tired more often, and the morning sickness lasted longer. But she was also experienced enough not to panic at every little thing. And Dalton was a seasoned father now, able to handle the children and give Zara time to rest. In early spring of 1891, Zara gave birth to their 4th child, another son they named Thomas, after the minister who had married them. The labor was difficult, and Dr. Morgan warned them afterward that they should probably not have any more children. Zara's body had been through a lot, and another pregnancy might be dangerous. Dalton and Zara agreed that 4 children was perfect. Their family felt complete. The house that had once been so empty now rang with children's laughter and the constant noise of a busy household. James, at 7, was already helping with ranch work, showing the same dedication and love for the land that his father had. Lucy was sweet and gentle, always helping her mother in the kitchen. Anna was wild and spirited, constantly getting into mischief. And little Thomas was a happy baby, content to watch his siblings play. The ranch had grown and prospered too. Dalton had expanded his herd and bought more land. They had chickens and pigs now, and Zara's garden produced more vegetables than they could eat, allowing them to sell the surplus in town. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough to provide for their children and even save a little for the future. One evening in late summer, after the children were all in bed, Dalton and Zara sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. It was a ritual they still maintained, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "You ever think about that first night?" Dalton asked. "When I came home and found you baking bread in my kitchen," Zara laughed. "I think about it all the time. I was so scared and so desperate. I had no idea that breaking into your house would change my entire life." "That bread," Dalton said, shaking his head in wonder. "It brought back memories of my mother that I had buried so deep I had almost forgotten them. It made me remember what it felt like to have a home, a real home with warmth and love. I think that is why I took a chance on you, because you reminded me of something I thought I had lost forever." "I am glad you took that chance," Zara said. "I am glad you saw past the fact that I was a stranger who broke into your house and gave me an opportunity to prove myself." "Best decision I ever made," Dalton said firmly. "You and the children, you are everything to me. This life we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed of having." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through the grass. "I wrote to the children's grandmother's lawyer last month," Zara said suddenly. "Not for money, but just to let him know that I survived, that I made a good life for myself. I wanted him to know that losing the farm was not the end for me." "What did he say?" Dalton asked. "He wrote back last week. He said he was glad to hear I was well and happy. He also said that if I had stayed in Kansas, I probably would have ended up in a factory or worse, that there really were no opportunities for women like me there. He said going west was the best thing I could have done." "He was right," Dalton said, "but it took courage to do what you did. To set out alone with almost nothing, hoping to find something better. Not everyone would have had that strength." "I did not feel strong," Zara admitted. "I felt terrified most of the time, but what other choice did I have? Stay and starve? I had to take the risk." "And look where that risk brought you," Dalton said, gesturing at the house behind them, full of sleeping children, full of life and love. As the years continued to pass, the Lawson family became a fixture in the community around Reading. Dalton was respected as a fair and hard-working rancher, and Zara was known for her kindness and her incredible cooking. She often brought food to families who were struggling or sick, and she had a reputation for always being willing to help a neighbor in need. The children grew up strong and healthy, shaped by the values their parents instilled in them. James became a skilled horseman and rancher, working alongside his father and learning everything he could about the land and the animals. Lucy showed a talent for sewing and art, creating beautiful quilts and paintings that decorated their home. Anna never lost her wild spirit but channeled it into riding and exploring, knowing every inch of their land better than anyone except her father. Thomas grew into a curious, intelligent boy who loved books and learning, and Dalton arranged for a tutor to come out from town once a week to teach him advanced subjects. In 1895, when James was 13 and showing himself to be a capable and responsible young man, Dalton sat down with him for a serious conversation. "Son, you are old enough now to start thinking about the future. This ranch will be yours someday, yours and your siblings. But I want you to know that you do not have to be a rancher if you do not want to. If you have other dreams, other plans, your mother and I will support you." James looked surprised. "But I want to be a rancher. I want to keep this place going, to build on what you have started." "Why would I want anything else?" Dalton felt a surge of pride and relief. "I am glad to hear that, but I wanted you to know you had a choice. My father never gave me that. He assumed I would be a farmer like him, and when he died, I felt trapped by that expectation. I do not want you to feel that way." "I do not feel trapped," James said firmly. "I feel lucky. You and Mama built something real here, something good. I want to be part of that." That conversation solidified something in Dalton's mind. He began formally teaching James everything about running the ranch, not just the daily work but the business side, the finances, the planning for the future. James soaked it all up eagerly, asking questions and offering ideas. Dalton realized his son had inherited his own work ethic and his mother's intelligence, a powerful combination. The turn of the century brought changes to Montana and to Redding. The town grew, adding new businesses and services. The railroad that had seemed so far away when Dalton first arrived now ran through a town just 20 miles from Redding, making it easier to transport cattle and goods. Technology was advancing, and there was talk of automobiles and electricity coming to even remote places like their town. Dalton and Zara watched these changes with mixed feelings. They appreciated the progress, the way it made life easier and safer. But they also worried about losing the character of the place they loved, the wild beauty and independence that had drawn them both here. "The world is changing," Zara said one evening as they sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 2 decades now. "Sometimes I wonder if our children will want to stay here, or if they will be drawn to the cities and all the new opportunities there." "James will stay," Dalton said confidently. "He loves this land as much as I do. As for the girls and Thomas, we will have to wait and see, but even if they leave, we raised them well. They will make good lives for themselves wherever they go." As it turned out, James was not the only one who wanted to stay. Lucy, at 15, had caught the eye of a young man from town, the son of the general store owners. His name was Peter Hart, and he was a hardworking, honest young man who wanted to start his own ranch. Dalton and Zara approved of the match, and when Lucy was 17, she and Peter were married. They settled on land adjacent to the Lawson Ranch, building their own house and starting their own herd with cattle Dalton gave them as a wedding gift. Anna, predictably, was more restless. At 16, she announced she wanted to train horses professionally, that she had a gift for it and wanted to make it her career. This was unusual for a young woman, but Dalton and Zara had always encouraged their children to pursue their talents. They helped Anna set up a training operation on a corner of the ranch, and within a year, she had more business than she could handle, with people coming from all over Montana to have her train their horses. Thomas, as he grew older, remained interested in learning and books. He wanted to go to college, something neither Dalton nor Zara had ever imagined for their children. But they supported him, saving money and making plans. When he was 18 in 1904, Thomas left for college in Helena, planning to study law. It was bittersweet to see him go, but they were proud of his ambition and determination. James, meanwhile, had married a girl from Redding named Clara, and they had their first child in 1902, making Dalton and Zara grandparents for the first time. The baby, another James, was a joy to them both, and they loved spending time with their grandson, spoiling him in the way grandparents do. One evening in the spring of 1905, Dalton and Zara sat on their porch as always, but now they were both in their 50s, showing the signs of age and a life of hard work. Dalton's hair was more gray than brown now, and Zara had lines around her eyes from years of smiling and squinting in the sun. But they were still healthy and strong, still deeply in love. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Zara asked. "You said the bread smelled like your mother's used to smell." "I remember," Dalton said. "It is still true. Every time you bake bread, I think of her. I think of how she would have loved you, how she would have been so happy to see the life we built." "I wish I could have met her," Zara said. "She must have been an amazing woman to raise a son like you." "She was strong," Dalton said. "Like you. She never complained, no matter how hard things got. She just kept working, kept pushing forward. I think that is where I learned to do the same." "I think about my father sometimes," Zara said. "About how devastated he would have been if he knew I ended up breaking into a stranger's house, desperate and alone. But then I think about how happy he would be now, seeing me with you and the children. He would have loved this life we built." "We built it together," Dalton said, taking her hand. "You and me. We both came to this place broken and looking for something better, and we found it in each other." They sat in silence, comfortable and companionable, watching the sun set as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch stretched around them, prosperous and beautiful. In the house behind them, the rooms that had once echoed with emptiness now held memories of laughter and love, of children growing up in family gatherings, of all the moments that make a life worth living. "I am grateful," Zara said softly, "for all of it. The good and the bad, because the bad brought me here to you. I would go through it all again if I knew this was where I would end up." "So would I," Dalton agreed. "Every hardship, every loss, it was all worth it to get to this moment, right here with you." As the years rolled on into the new century, Dalton and Zara settled into a comfortable rhythm. They were grandparents now to multiple grandchildren, with James and Clara having 3 children, and Lucy and Peter having 2. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, with Dalton stepping back more and more, content to let his son take the lead while he enjoyed his later years. Thomas graduated from college and became a lawyer in Helena, but he visited often, and Dalton and Zara were immensely proud of his accomplishments. Anna married a horse breeder from Wyoming, and they split their time between both states, building a successful business together. In 1910, Dalton and Zara celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party in town, and it seemed like everyone in Redding showed up. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and speech after speech from people whose lives Dalton and Zara had touched over the years. As Dalton stood to make a toast, looking out at the crowd of friends and family, he felt a sense of contentment so deep it almost hurt. "25 years ago," he began, "I came home to find a stranger in my kitchen baking bread. I had every reason to be angry to send her away. But something about that bread, about the smell of it, reminded me of home, reminded me of what I was missing in my life. So I took a chance on that stranger, and it turned out to be the best decision I ever made." He turned to Zara, who was wiping tears from her eyes. "You have given me everything. A home, a family, a life worth living. You took a broken, lonely man and taught him how to love again. I am grateful for every single day I get to spend with you." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Zara stood and hugged Dalton tightly, and they danced together as the band played, surrounded by the people they loved. As they grew older, Dalton and Zara made sure to pass on their story to their grandchildren. They wanted them to know how their family began, how a desperate gamble and an act of kindness had created all of this. The grandchildren loved hearing about how Grandma had broken into Grandpa's house, how he had found her baking bread, how they had fallen in love. "Tell us about the bread," one of the younger grandchildren would always say. "Tell us how it smelled." And Dalton would close his eyes and smile. "It smelled like home," he would say. "Like love and warmth and everything good. It smelled like your grandmother." In 1915, as they approached their 60th birthdays, Dalton and Zara finally retired completely from active work. James ran the ranch now, with help from his own children who were growing up into capable young people. Lucy and Peter's ranch was thriving. Anna's horse training business was known across multiple states. Thomas was a successful lawyer with his own practice. Dalton and Zara spent their days simply tending a small garden, raiding, visiting with grandchildren, and of course, sitting on their porch in the evenings watching the sun set. The ritual they had started so many years ago continued, a constant in a changing world. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Zara turned to Dalton with a soft smile. "You know what I thought when I first saw you standing in the doorway that night, when I turned around and you were there? What did you think?" "I thought you looked kind." "Stern, yes, and a little scary because I knew I had done something wrong. But underneath that, kind. And I remember thinking, hoping, that maybe you would not throw me out into the dark, that maybe you would give me a chance. I never imagined you would give me this." "I took one look at you," Dalton said, "and saw someone strong enough to do what she had to do to survive. You could have stolen things and run. Instead, you baked bread and planned to leave payment. That told me everything I needed to know about your character." "We were both alone," Zara mused. "Both lost in our own ways, both looking for something we did not even know we needed. And we found it," Dalton said simply. "We found each other." They sat together as darkness fell, holding hands, comfortable in the silence. Inside the house, a lamp was lit, casting a warm glow through the windows. Their daughter Anna was visiting with her husband and children, and the sound of the grandchildren's laughter drifted out to the porch. "This is what I dreamed of," Dalton said quietly. "When I was young and lost and alone, I used to dream of having this. A full house, family all around, love and laughter. I had given up on that dream until you walked into my life." "I had given up too," Zara admitted. "I thought survival was the best I could hope for. A job, a place to sleep, enough to eat. The idea of love, of a real home, seemed like a fantasy. But you gave me all of that and more." As the stars came out, filling the vast Montana sky with their distant light, Dalton and Zara remained on the porch, reluctant to go inside and end this perfect moment. They had built a life here on this land, a life full of hard work and joy, challenges and triumphs, sorrow and love. They had raised good children who had become good adults who were raising good children of their own. They had been partners in every sense of the word, equal and devoted. "No regrets?" Dalton asked, as he sometimes did. "Not a single one," Zara answered, as she always did. "You?" "None," he confirmed. "Except maybe that I did not find you sooner." They finally went inside as the night grew cold, closing the door on another day, another perfect ordinary day in their extraordinary life together. The house welcomed them with warmth and light, with the sound of family and the smell of home. Years continued to pass, gentle and kind. Dalton and Zara celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. They grew older, slower, their hair turning silver, their bodies wearing down from decades of hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper, more profound. tempered by time and trials into something unbreakable. In the winter of 1920, Dalton fell ill with pneumonia. The illness was severe, and for several terrifying days Zara thought she might lose him. She stayed by his bedside constantly, holding his hand, talking to him, refusing to let him go. The children came, gathering around their father, willing him to fight. And he did, eventually fighting his way back from the brink. But the illness left him weakened, and Dalton never quite regained his full strength. He did not complain. Instead, he adapted, doing less physical work and spending more time enjoying the life he had built. He held his grandchildren and told them stories. He sat on the porch with Zara every evening, weather permitting. He watched his children and grandchildren thrive, secure in the knowledge that everything he and Zara had worked for would continue long after they were gone. One summer evening in 1922, as they sat on the porch for what would be one of the last times, Dalton turned to Zara with a peaceful expression. "You know what the best moment of my life was?" he asked. Zara smiled. "Tell me." "It was that first evening when I came home and smelled bread baking. The moment before I walked into the house, when I was standing outside wondering what I would find. In that moment, my whole life changed. Everything good that came after started right there. So that moment, that is the best one. The moment when everything became possible." Zara's eyes filled with tears. "For me, it was when you offered me the job. When you looked at me, this desperate stranger who had broken into your home, and you saw someone worth helping, someone worth taking a chance on. That was when my life began again." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar colors they had watched together for nearly 40 years. The land around them was the same and yet different, shaped by their care and attention into something productive and beautiful. The house behind them held decades of memories, layers of love and life built up over the years. Dalton passed away peacefully in his sleep in the autumn of 1923 at the age of 69. He died as he had lived his later years, content and surrounded by love. Zara held his hand as he slipped away, whispering her love and gratitude, promising to watch over everything they had built together. The funeral was held in the small church where they had married 40 years earlier, and it seemed like everyone in Reading and the surrounding area attended. Person after person stood to speak about Dalton Lawson, about his fairness, his integrity, his kindness. But it was Zara's words that everyone remembered. "He gave me a chance when I had nothing," she said, her voice strong despite her grief. "He looked past the surface, past the desperate circumstances, and saw the person I could be. He gave me a home, a family, a life beyond anything I could have imagined. He was the best man I ever knew, and I am grateful for every single day I had with him. He will live on in our children, in our grandchildren, in this land we loved, and he will live on in my heart until I draw my last breath." Zara lived for another 7 years after Dalton's death, staying in the ranch house, surrounded by family. Her children tried to convince her to move into town or to come live with one of them, but she refused. This was her home, the home she and Dalton had made together, and she wanted to stay there. She spent her days much as she and Dalton had spent their later years together, tending her garden, reading, visiting with grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. And every evening she would sit on the porch and watch the sun set, sometimes talking aloud to Dalton as if he were still there beside her. On a warm summer evening in 1930, Zara Kendall Lawson, age 73, sat on her porch as the sun set. Her grandson James, named for both her father and her eldest son, found her there an hour later, peacefully passed on, a small smile on her face. In her lap was a photograph of her and Dalton on their wedding day, young and full of hope, beginning the great adventure of their life together. The funeral was as well attended as Dalton's had been. Zara had touched countless lives over the decades with her kindness, her generosity, her strength. She had been a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a friend, a neighbor. She had helped build a community, raising children who went on to do the same. But perhaps her greatest legacy was the love story she and Dalton had created, a story that began with an act of desperation and an act of kindness, and grew into something beautiful and lasting. Their descendants continued to tell that story, to pass it down through the generations, keeping alive the memory of how their family began. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations. The house was preserved, renovated when necessary, but keeping its essential character. And on summer evenings, you could still find family members sitting on that porch, watching the sun set over the Montana landscape, honoring the tradition that Dalton and Zara had started so many years before. In the kitchen, their great-great-grandchildren learned to bake bread using the starter that had come from Germany generations ago. The same starter Zara had used that fateful evening when she had broken into a lonely rancher's home and changed both their lives forever. The bread still tasted the same, and those who had been lucky enough to taste Zara's own baking swore it brought back memories just as powerfully as it had for Dalton that first night. The story of Dalton and Zara became a family legend, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the most unlikely ways. That's sometimes taking a chance on a stranger, seeing past the surface to the person beneath, can lead to something extraordinary. That sometimes desperation and kindness can combine to create something beautiful. And always, the story ended the same way, with two people who had been alone and lost finding each other, with a house that became a home, with a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, living on in the family they created, in the land they tended, in the memories they made. A love that began with the simple, powerful act of baking bread, and the memory of home that simple act awakened.